regular meeting for the Ames City Council for December 22nd, 2020 to order. Welcome to council and staff. As allowed by the Code of Iowa, this meeting is being held electronically. If you wish to access it by Zoom, you're encouraged to go to zoom.us/j/826-593-023. There's also a toll-free number, and this is 888-475-4499, and the Zoom ID meeting number is 826-593-023. All right, we'll go to the first meeting. Our first item on the agenda is consent agenda. Council, does anyone wish to pull any item from consent tonight? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve consent.
Move consent. Second.
Corey and Betcher, thank you. Roll call.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to public forum. This is time that we set aside for the public to address council on topics of city business that are not on the agenda. The council will not take any action on any item brought up during public forum. And we welcome your comments, and we ask that you would limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. And Brian, is there anybody indicating an interest to address council tonight under public forum?
Mayor, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
All right, we will close public forum and we'll move on to item number 23. Motion to extend suspension of vending licenses until June 30, 2021. Brian, you want to give us a quick recap and we'll see if there's any questions.
Yes, so last year, or earlier this year rather, staff administratively suspended the issuance of vending licenses, which are licenses required if you plan to sell something, particularly food, on public streets or sidewalks. We have had some vending licenses issued as parts of special events that took place earlier this year. And then in August, the City Council extended the suspension of vending licenses until the end of the calendar year in about a week and a half now. So we're asking the City Council what you would like to do with that suspension. Back in August, when we approved the suspension through the end of the calendar year, the council directed us to come back before that time to get your feedback and decision about how to proceed. I want to also mention that we received a letter from Campus Town Action Association. Karen Chitty, the executive director of CAA, and I spoke the other day about the how vending is going to work with the new Welch Avenue project. And I forwarded you her letter, which I believe requested that we continue the suspension of vending licenses until we can develop a plan for how vending will go back into the Welch Avenue area. There are some issues that we as city staff have with the vending code that I think have come up to the City Council before, but also there are some concerns on CAA's part about ensuring that that streetscape that has just reopened is accomplishing the vibrant gathering space kind of goal that was laid out when that project started. So you have that letter and you have the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for Brian?
Brian, I don't understand why we're doing this, and maybe you could walk me through a little bit of the rationale. Vendors are currently able to, when we had the farmers market, they were able to sell food during the farmers market. Is that correct?
Yes, not right away, but I believe eventually we approved allowing vendors back into the farmers market, and vending just like normal.
So a vendor could be selling food at 10 o'clock in the morning on Main Street, and that would be legal in the farmer's market. But if they were to sell it at 10 o'clock at night on Main Street, now all of a sudden it's problematic for the city. The other sort of major sort of odd connections, it's perfectly legal on private property to have vending. So all over town, we see people sort of scrambling to grab a parking lot. And so you can have a situation where vending is perfectly permissible on one block, and then because it's a public street, now it's somehow illegal. The other thing that I thought was interesting, this is an outdoor activity as opposed to an indoor activity. So if we're concerned about COVID, patrons are far safer outside to buy their food than inside to buy the food. And you have places like Bebop's, and they offer a place where people walk up, and we're not shutting them down. And I went on the CDC website. I see nothing on the CDC website that justifies taking away people's livelihood like this. And so, we can deal with the Campus Town Action. That didn't solve anything for me. We can work on those, fine-tuning those rules later on. But it seems like this is an important area of livelihood for people, and frankly, a lot of minorities who are utilizing food carts as a way of starting a business. I guess, could you help me walk me through why are we so concerned about this, given all of these other areas where food vendors are able to function?
Well, I think there's just to remind you, the reason why this is coming back to you is because the council said it needs to come back to you before the end of the year. That's the primary reason. Secondarily, historically, we have had some pretty sizable gatherings that get created in the lines for food vendors, particularly in the Campus Town area. And so that has been a concern. And I think it is fair that the rules are different on private property versus city property, but the question is just what do you want to do with the city property? Do you want to allow this activity right now or not?
Well, I think it's fair. I appreciate you reminding me that that we asked you to bring this back, but it seems to be a bit arbitrary and capricious to forbid activity in one block that is perfectly permissible somewhere else. If we were going to be consistent, we should just shut down all the food vendors, because you could have a crowd on a piece of private property just as easy as a public property, right?
I suppose if the council viewed it that way, the council could do that. But here we're just talking about what we control on the private or on the public property, rather.
So I'll see if other people have questions before I make a motion.
So, Tim, I guess I am more inclined to listen to Campus Town Action Association in this instance, because I think we know it's always easier to make changes before reinstating something that has been suspended rather than reinstating it. And I don't know, Brian, did you have a chance to talk to Karen much about those concerns that she expressed in her letter?
Yes, she and I talked last week on the phone, or on Zoom rather, for about half hour, 45 minutes. And that's what I think precipitated the letter going to you. She raised those questions sort of independently of this item being on the agenda to allow vending back on. And so it was timely to bring those issues up with the council and have you consider whether those convinced you to continue the suspension or not. I think it's helpful to consider those two things together rather than separately.
But in fairness, we went through about 5 years ago we did a wholesale rewrite of the vending ordinance while it was in place. So, I mean, that's just not a persuasive argument that somehow we can't tweak this while the ordinance is in place. Of course we can. We make changes to ordinances while they're in place all the time. So, you know, if we're going to take away someone's liberty to do their livelihood, I think we have to have a pretty strong reason. And I don't know any public health reasons. People are free if they don't want to go to a food cart, they don't have to, but I think we need to give people that choice.
Tim, can I finish asking my questions, please?
Sure.
Brian, do we know of people who've been requesting vending licenses from the city at this point? Or do we have any sense of how many of the vendors have now relocated to private property and are continuing to operate?
Well, they've all either relocated or have just closed up shop during the time that this has been suspended. I think with the Welch Avenue project, we've realized one of the spaces that was previously occupied by a vendor, some of the streetscape features don't exactly work with accommodating that vendor any longer. And so we have connected or have tried to connect with that vendor to see what could be done to address it. But ultimately, it may end up being something that has to come back to the city council about whether you want to modify the street to allow that person to go back. So we have had some inquiries, but we have a big statement on the top of the vending license webpage that indicates that they're suspended right now. And I believe historically we've had 5 or 6 vending licenses in the Campustown area. And right now, if vending was to be reinstated starting January 1st, I think we would be down to 3.
And do we have locations other than these streetscaped locations for the vendors to operate in Campustown right now?
I don't believe all of the vending operations are on Welch. So I think there's one on Chamberlain, perhaps. And then, of course, downtown. There's at least one vendor downtown, typically.
And is it possible, if people were interested in reinstating the licensing at this point, for us to reinstate licensing around the community, except in Campustown, until we worked out the details of where those vendors could locate?
I would think so. The code allows vending carts to only operate in Campustown and downtown, and I would think that you could continue a suspension in Campustown while allowing it downtown.
Any other questions,
Thanks.
Laura? Are you
That's
done?
it. Thank you.
Other questions for Ryan?
I do have a question. I know that we don't have enforcement personnel stationed around vending facilities, but our face covering ordinance does still require people congregating around a food truck, say, to wear face coverings if they cannot socially distance at 6 feet. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Okay, that just seems like an ingredient. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll open up public comment. If anyone wants to address council on this particular topic, Brian, you want to explain how they can go about doing that?
Sure. Anybody who'd like to speak on this item or on a future item can indicate so by pressing the raise hand button if they're joining us online, or if they're on the phone, they can press *9 on their phone and we'll get the same indication that they've raised their hand.
Is there anybody interested in addressing council?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, we'll close public input.
Mayor, I would move alternative 2 to resume suspended vending licenses and direct staff to accept applications for new licenses effective immediately.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded on alternative number 2.
I have
So-
one question about procedure. If we vote on this, but we're interested in examining the circumstances of vending in Campustown, is that something that we can move immediately after this, or does that have to be reserved for council comments later?
I think it would be germane to the conversation and the items, so let's just go ahead and we'll take it up at the same time then.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any further questions or comments? Okay, those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right, Gloria.
I would like to move that we ask staff to engage further with the Campustown Action Association to determine which elements of vending in Campustown they believe are going to be problematic, so that we could look at revising the vending licensure and location in the future.
Is there a second?
Second.
Just
Right,
for
right, second.
clarification, when we issue these permits, usually, and Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, usually they're for a period of time. Isn't it a year, Brian? So if we institute it right now in a certain location, it'll be difficult. You're going to live with that for another year unless you tell us to issue it in a shorter period of time until you come up with new rules. So is there any preference there? I just want to clarify to you that we'll issue it for a year.
Do we know how long it would take to go through the process of developing this? I mean, it seems like it could be a year before we get to discussing it again.
Yeah, I would think that this is something that wouldn't come back to you before the summer at the earliest. So it's 6 months to a year, perhaps.
Well, then I guess we just let them have it issued for a year. As far as I'm concerned, I just want to make sure that we're having the discussion.
Do you wish to keep your motion on the table or you want to withdraw your motion?
No, I want to keep the motion on the table.
Very good. Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 24, resolution approving amendment to Schedule 3 of Energy Services Agreement with Forefront Power regarding SunSmart Ames Community Solar Farm. Steve, and I presume is
I think Don, let's see if Don's on. Yeah.
Don and Kaylee are both on.
Yeah,
I am
Don-
here.
Don
I am
Barber
here.
Worked on this, right, Don?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of City Council. In 2019, we signed a contract with Forefront to build our first community solar farm. Did an excellent job and we've got a signed contract, and the solar farm actually is basically complete. It's going through its final testing. A few weeks ago, well, part of the arrangements are Forefront through a subcontractor builds it, and then Forefront finances it, owns it, and we purchase the power off of the solar farm for 25 years. So we have an agreement with Forefront. Part of the benefits of working with a third party is there are production tax credits that the federal government gives. To make use of these, you have to be a taxable entity, not a tax exempt entity such as the city. So Forefront is also working with a tax equity partner. In looking at the contract that Ames has with Forefront, their tax equity partner that they're lining up looked at a certain schedule. It's called Schedule 3. And there were some concerns with the schedule as it's set up that don't adequately reflect the true fair market value of the system going forward. Now, the Schedule 3 is a section of the contract that is not typically used. This would only be applied if in a situation where the city chose to purchase the solar farm and require Forefront to remove it early. So during these 25 years of the contract, if we trigger that, the schedule as it sits right now is preventing the tax equity partner from being part of the financing arm with Forefront. This is putting that portion of the agreement somewhat in jeopardy between Forefront and their tax equity partner. As staff looked at it, the probability or the possibility that we would ever trigger that is very minor and very remote. So in reading through the council action form, hopefully it did as good, if not a better job explaining that than I just went through. But in looking at this, what staff is asking for is that looking at all of the different options, we think it's in the city's best interest to accept this change to Schedule 3 and allow the tax equity partner to join in on the financing and allow us to basically turn on the solar farm and begin to take energy from the solar farm.
Thank you, Don. Questions for Don or Kaylee?
And I will say there's also a representative of Forefront that may have tuned in. So if you have specific questions for Forefront, they're also available to answer any questions.
Seeing that council has no questions, we'll go ahead and open up public comment on this item. Is there anyone in attendance that wishes to address council on this particular item?
Mayor, I don't see anyone with their hand raised.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close public input. Council, any questions again for staff before I entertain a motion on this item?
Just, I have one question. This is unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I'm struggling actually to try to understand what it is we're being asked to do. What is the downside? So the recommendation is alternative 1. Are there any downsides that as a council we need to be aware of? Any kind of pitfalls that we should be considering?
Excellent question. So the potential downside, and again, this is rare and it's remote, but the potential is there if 10 years from now, we, for some reason, need or desire to have the solar farm removed. Not only turned over, but turned off, removed, taken out. That's when this section of the contract would apply. We would contact Forefront and say we want to terminate our agreement with them early. And as part of the termination, we would also then require them to remove all of their equipment and bring it back to farmland again. If that were the case, under the existing contract, and it depends upon what year you do this, there is a fee and a cost that's associated with the contract today. What Forefront is asking for is that these fees and costs will increase as much as $1 million in some cases, depending again upon the year and things like that. So it's dealing with a unique it's dealing with a unique situation that we are not planning on ever activating during the 25 years of the contract. But if there was some extraordinary reason during the life of the contract we would need it removed, that's when this section would be applied.
And if we said no to this, what would the implications of that be?
I'm not sure if the Forefront gentleman is on, but from our standpoint, it could be without their tax equity partner, the solar farm would not be turned on at this point. They would either have to locate a new tax equity partner who may require the same changes. And we'd kind of be in a gray area, and I'd have to look to the contract and talk to Mark Lambert as to what next steps could be.
And I've got the staff report in front of me, but Is this something that could have been anticipated on the front end of this? I mean, it seems like a significant change that we're making that might have been anticipated if they were going to need one of these tax partners.
Yeah. When we signed the contract in 2019, we were led to believe that everything was set up and taken care of completely. When this came up, I want to say about a month ago, we asked the exact same question. Says, why didn't you have your tax equity partner lined up at the time you signed the contract? And we were informed at that time that that's simply not the process, because what happens in projects like this, a developer will build several solar farms or will propose several solar farms. When they get close to completion, they then package or bundle all of these different projects up and they present it to large banks or to entities that can absorb millions of dollars in tax equity. And so they go and say, here's our portfolio of 5, 6, 10 projects, join us. And they then look through that book of accounts and they say, well, I don't like this one, or this is a problem based on the current environment. And that's why then Forefront came to us and asked for this change.
It just seems like if they knew going into this agreement that was something that would be required, that would be something that the city would need to know, and that if there were risks, the city could offset the risk. It seems like sort of a funny way of doing business, where you don't tell the other side you're going to need this change. So that's all. Those are the comments I have. It just feels like an odd situation. As a city council, we don't find ourselves in this situation on a regular basis, so it's sort of awkward for us midstream.
Tim, there is a representative of Forefront that is available. Do you wish to ask him that question also, or is Don's response adequate?
Well, I think Don answered the best that he could, and if the Forefront representative has some feedback based on these comments, that I think might be helpful. I don't know if other council members have similar questions about sort of how we got to where we are with this.
Other council members have any questions? Ryan, you want to see if the Forefront representative wishes to address council and answer the question any further?
Yes, Matthew Grossman represents Forefront, and Matthew, you can unmute yourself and provide some comments.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can, Matthew.
Great, thanks. To answer Tim's question and give a little context on this, we knew that we were going to need to bring in a tax equity partner down the road as we got towards the completion of construction on the project in order to finance the system. I'm sure we mentioned that, but ideally, the city would never see the tax equity partner. That'd be a concern. That's our problem and that we take care of. Admittedly, if we had correctly anticipated the values that were going to need to be in this schedule a year and a half or 2 years ago when we were first proposing this contract, we wouldn't be in the situation where we need to kind of come to you guys here hat in hand asking for this change to move forward with the project. So it was definitely a bit of a miss on our part in the initial contracting. We have been working with Don to understand the situations where this could really affect the city. And our understanding is the most likely case where this could actually affect an outcome that the city would like to pursue is in the event of a buyout around year 10 of the contract or somewhere about that. And we were originally requesting that minimum buyout value be increased as well. But after understanding that is likely to impact the city, we tried to meet in a middle ground here, and Forefront absorbs any potential loss from that minimum amount in the contract being lower than our financing partners would like to see, and only have this change be to values which are we understand to be extremely unlikely to impact the city in the future.
So Matthew, if I might just clarify and just draw the council's attention on page 2 of the council action form is, I believe, the table you're talking about where an option to purchase the system outright after the 6th anniversary. Am I correct in interpreting what I heard you say was that you went ahead and honored the price that was included in the contract at your own risk for the buyout? It was when you have to early termination fee and removal are the ones that would be, that's where the big impact occurs.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Grossman? Hearing none. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate your input.
Thanks for having me.
All right, council, any further discussion? Otherwise, I entertain a motion.
So I assume that Don and Mark have talked about ways to try to offset risk and things like indemnification agreements, if those were important. This is just a strange ask, so I'm going to have to be pretty deferential to staff on this.
Mark, do you have any comment?
Yep, sorry, it takes me a second to get back on. Yeah, well, Don and I have talked about this. You know, I guess I didn't see a ton of risk in this. There's a little risk to the city, but so I didn't feel the need for you know, anything to offset that. It's just, you know, changing the schedule. So I didn't see a major risk to us there.
Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, council, staff presented 2 alternatives: approve the amendment or do not approve the requested changes. Entertain a motion.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Bronwyn and Gloria, thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Kaylee. Moving on to item number 26, request to initiate zoning. I'm sorry, my bad. Item 25, Innis Grove Sidewalk Project. Keith. And actually, while Keith's getting on, council, does anyone have any questions for Keith regarding this particular item?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. With this item, at the December 8th meeting, City Council did award a contract to Pillar Inc. out of Huxley for the Innis Grove Sidewalk Project. After the award was done, staff did notice that there was an error in their computation, which actually took them from a low bid of $170,000 to actually a bid of $905,000, and is explained in the council action form of how that happens with unit prices. And if there's a discrepancy, we look at the unit pricing, and that's what created such a much larger bid amount. So before you, alternative 1 has 2 pieces or 2 parts. Part A, which is to reconsider, you know, the award for Pillar, which, according to Mark, the city attorney, really what that does is reconsidering does undo that action. And then Part B would be to award the contract to the next lower bidder, which is TK Concrete of Pella, in the amount of $170,484.40. So the bid project estimate was $220,000. We have $200,000. So even with that low bid, we still have enough money allocated for this project, which the total estimate would be $183,000, which would leave just under $17,000 for contingency. So staff's recommendation or city manager's recommended action is alternative number 1. I would answer any questions that anybody has.
Any questions for Keith? All right, we'll open up public comment. Brian, is there anyone who wants to address council on this particular item?
Mayor, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Thank you. We will close public comment. Entertain a motion to reconsider award of contract to Pillar Inc. of Huxley, Iowa.
So moved.
Betcher.
Second.
Corey, seconded. Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Entertain a motion on resolution approving award of contract to TK Construction of Pella, Iowa in the amount of $170,484.40.
So moved.
Second.
Rachel and Gloria, thank you. Roll call.
Young,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Moving on to item 26, request to initiate zoning text amendment to eliminate residential parking requirements downtown. Kelly?
Good evening, City Council. This is in response to a request by a property owner downtown. As we described in the staff report, downtown parking requires one space per apartment, which is the same as the standard in Campus Town. The rest of the city, we use a one space per bedroom requirement. The reason the city uses one space per apartment is really to think of it as a more dense and urban area. And to support that density, you usually have to reduce parking because parking is a significant land use and a significant cost for development. What the request is tonight is to consider if for small or medium-sized projects, which the requester defined as up to 18 units, whether the city would go further and waive some of the parking requirements for those apartments. And what we outlined in the staff report are multiple ways that we could provide more flexibility. We allow for remote parking currently in the zoning ordinance, but it has a 300-foot distance requirement. It also essentially requires a perpetuity requirement that the space that's identified for remote parking is always available for that user. So in the staff report, we talk about waiving parking spaces. We talk about defining what a small or medium-sized project is. We also discussed that maybe changes to remote parking are possible. And potentially even including the use of public land. Some of our remote parking opportunities could be in the public lots, or maybe consider on-street parking are options too. So for tonight, what we're asking is if City Council is willing to consider changing the parking requirement downtown, that you first think about one, do you believe that we need parking for small and medium-sized projects? If you think we need that, then there is no necessity to change the standard, but you would maybe think about the remote parking option to provide more flexibility. If you agree with the request that the parking, if we could waive that standard or change its requirement, it would allow for some small projects to get built downtown, and that's good, then you would initiate a text amendment. And the options there are essentially to waive it in the zoning ordinance for everybody and everything, or possibly make it a rental code requirement only. So the zoning ordinance would not be the enforcement mechanism. It would be an annual letter of compliance issue in the rental code. And after you've kind of decided that issue about do you expect parking to be available or not for these residential uses, we also have a last issue where we think that it may be beneficial to look at our operations downtown and consider our overnight parking prohibitions. And this could go hand in hand with allowing for remote parking, or it could just be beneficial in general to those people that already have housing downtown that may wish to rent a space from the city, but currently that's not available in our system. So with that, I would like to take questions on what we would like to do with the request tonight.
I have a couple of questions. The first is the staff report mentions not being in favor of allowing large apartments like 5-bedroom apartments under the terms of this sort of thing. So if we were to aim apartment size that would be appropriate, what should we be thinking? Like 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom?
So then in the downtown gateway zoning, we lowered the parking for studio 1 and 2 bedrooms
And then if you build 3 or 4 bedroom or 5 bedroom apartments, the parking kicks back to the normal standard. So my comfort level is in the 2 bedrooms or less as kind of that universal apartment that you would see in most urban environments versus the influence of student housing where we usually see that 4 bedroom design.
Sure. Thank you.
I personally would prefer the 2 bedroom as kind of the cap on the smaller apartment size. Not that you build a larger one, but then you would have to consider parking.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, so the original request to us was to consider 18 unit developments, but the staff report is recommending 8 to 12 units. Can you explain what's the difference here? So if I imagine we would permit a 3-level housing development in DSC, wouldn't we?
Yeah, so actually we have a very large height allowance in downtown. You can go up to 100 feet. The practical design issues are typically 5 and 6 story limits on buildings if you were constructing new construction. I think that to me, the difference between saying 12 and 18 is whether you're facilitating one whole level of additional housing that could be added to a building. I think the idea that we're trying to get across in the staff report is to think about your normal lot in downtown, which is about 50 by 100. You could guesstimate about six apartments per floor in that situation. So if you went from 12 to 18, you could think that you're encouraging 1 additional floor on that. So maybe instead of a 3-story building, you're looking at a 4-story building or maybe a 5-story building.
So is it correct then to say that your recommendation of 8 to 12 units is just sort of assuming then that the 3-story building is more likely for us to be thinking about than a 4-story building or higher?
I think it fits the character of most of historic downtown better. Obviously allow in the zoning more intense projects, but if you're thinking about the compatibility issue, I would say that the 3-story building is the most compatible for much of historic downtown. Newer, larger projects would definitely be larger, but I don't know that you want to incent that or not. So this is where that parking is a big factor in urban design. It controls parking through cost. It also controls design aspects on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, do we have a means of enforcing the requirement that there be parking in perpetuity?
But we would be in remote parking. It's an agreement with the city. So city council has to accept it. It gets recorded on a property. And in some cases, there's an easement put over it to even make it more secure or more obvious that there's a restriction on its use. They do exist in the city now. It's not like we go and police them, but it's more that there's a commitment that they're there. And if they're required to be used, it is there and it's available for the tenant.
It's always seemed odd that we try to get people to agree that this is going to be available forever. And so that strikes me as a little bit hard to enforce. With regard to option 3, which uses the rental code as a means of policing that a little more effectively on a yearly basis as opposed to in perpetuity, am I reading this correctly that this would then enable apartment owners to rent from the city or from somebody else on an annual basis and have it approved annually?
Well, I don't know that council would necessarily be involved, right? If you wanted to rent a parking.
Sorry, I wasn't talking about council, just.
Okay. Yeah. So if on your letter of compliance, if this was the option that you picked, you would probably need to submit paperwork every year to the city proving that you have some version of a lease that would last for 1 year.
And my last question is there a reason that we settled on the 300-foot distance for remote parking? Because I know in larger cities, people may end up parking their cars quite a ways from their apartments because they don't use their vehicles that often. And I'm wondering if there's any room for expanding that 300-foot requirement in order to gain some more flexibility for those people who just don't use their cars very much.
I would say the 300, it's applied to all zoning districts, and it's the traditional block length is 300 feet. So I'm guessing that's where it originally came from. Obviously, we could write any number that we want. I mean, it's possible that you could just say any parking in the downtown service center zoning is adequate regardless of distance. We could stretch the distance to 800 feet or something that's 2 or 3 blocks also. It's about what level of flexibility are we willing to accept or are we just comfortable that parking's not really necessary and the market and the user will figure out what works best for that user.
Thank you.
Other questions? Kelly, philosophically, the reason that a parking requirement is tied to rental is what? Is it primarily to ensure that the people that are renting have the opportunity to park, or is it to try and control where people park, or what is it philosophically? Why is it included?
I think the first reason that cities have parking requirements is to not overburden the public supply. There's a limit to on-street parking. There's a limit to our parking lots downtown. So if everybody takes care of their own parking, then there's not a burden on the public for that. And then I think once you've established that that's what you want as a regulation in a city, then yes, parking is a good control over how things happen on a property, and it kind of makes everything systematically get developed and be very regular and repeatable, and just kind of help ensure that overall it's a workable design.
So on that basis, appreciate that. That's helpful. In staff's opinion, would the first criteria be in jeopardy if council decided to waive parking in the downtown area for smaller developments that are talked about?
I don't think it is. I think my only 2 concerns are that there's adequate parking for sure in current conditions. If we see people take advantage of a change and you see a pattern over 3 to 5 years of people really wanting to take public parking for overnight parking, and that's an issue, then we probably go back and change the standard again. I think the other issue I'm always going to be concerned about is not incenting the student housing environment to relocate to downtown, because it could be a desirable urban situation. It's easy bus access back into campus from here as well. But from a parking supply, I'm very confident actually that we can put our toe in the water here and not really have negative consequences.
Would that require some changes to the current parking allowances for overnight parking, as you mentioned previously?
There are a few reserved spaces available in the CBD lots. Most of those are rented. So if we wanted to increase supply, then we would have to look at some of the other overnight parking prohibitions that we have in downtown to add more supply.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Kelly? All right, we'll open up public comment. Brian, is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic this evening?
I see Chris Nelson has a hand raised. Chris, you can unmute yourself and begin your comments.
Chris, if you want to introduce yourself and your address, please, and then you may proceed.
Chris Nelson, 239 South Bell Avenue, Ames. And I'd like to thank staff for the report. I think it was has some pretty good options in there. I think if you read the letter that was submitted in the staff report, you'll see that parking is absolutely an impediment to increasing the housing stock downtown. So there's some good options there. I do want to follow up on one of the questions that David asked as the 12 to 18. It is very similar to what Kelly explained, that 6 units per floor is something realistic. And we were thinking 1 floor of commercial, 3 floors of residential, and having it be no higher than the Sheldon Munn. So that was how it came up with the 18. We didn't want it to overpower any buildings there, and 18 was the number that added up to. So in making the request originally, we tried to be very cognizant of unintended consequences and having it be kind of a policy level decision in that we don't want this to be good for one project. We want it to be good for downtown. So the size and some of the options that are available, I think really kind of accomplish that. So I like the idea of limiting the bedroom size so that 2-bedroom and less, I think, is completely appropriate. And dipping your toe in the water, I think, is a decent way to get started on this. The other comment I guess I'll make on this, and this is something that council hears all the time, completely aware of that, is that this particular property, this is a decision that will probably have to be made within the next 2 months as to whether or not it happens. So it may end up being good for downtown. It may not end up good for this project, depending on the timing. But we do think it's positive for downtown. So I'm happy to answer any other questions that people have.
Thank you, Chris. Given the fact that Chris is part and parcel or represents the person who initiated the request, certainly allow any comments or any questions for Chris on his input.
Chris, were there any of the options that you did not think were good ones or acceptable?
Well, I certainly don't like payment in lieu of fee of $25,000 a parking spot. But no, I think the restrictions on the bedroom size, I think getting to a point where there could be a rental code requirement could be entirely appropriate, either in the short term or in the longer term, as that kind of gets fleshed out. I do think changing the 300-foot rule would need to be different to help with that, just based on the geography of downtown. There's so few options of adding parking, having parking close by. There just aren't too many options. So I don't know, to answer your question, Gloria.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions? Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ryan, anybody else?
Mayor, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay, we'll close public input. Council?
Kelly, did we receive any input from any downtown businesses?
Oh, you're muted, Kelly.
We did not send out any specific notices to anybody about this because it was a staff report on considering options.
Kelly, how does staff view the use of the rental code versus not use of the rental code for enforcing parking requirements?
Well, we already use the rental code to enforce it, but it's the zoning ordinance that makes you build it in the first place. So by letting it just be a rental code issue, you take a lot of the entanglements of zoning away. The questions of hardships and variances and getting exceptions and all those things that have a lot more legal requirements behind them just go out the window, and you get to work within the rental code, which is really set up to be much more administrative in how it works. And I think it would work fine for this situation.
Thanks.
Kelly, it seems like there's been a lot of conversation over the years about trying to encourage housing in the downtown area. Can you comment on what what impediments might be? Is parking a major impediment to trying to see some units develop?
Yeah, I believe it is for two reasons. One, the lots that you see as surface parking lots now, they're fully occupied. They're not just vacant parking lots that are underutilized. So displacement of those parking lots is very difficult for people because they want replacement parking. And then the cost of structured parking, especially on small parcels, is basically astronomical. So you need to acquire more properties, have a bigger project to start to shoulder the construction of parking that's not on a surface lot. And in downtown, we won't let you build new surface lots that you have to have the street with a building. So it kind of pushes you into either a rear loaded environment or maybe some kind of parking structure. So with those two obstacles, I think that's one reason why you don't see any real redevelopment or additions in downtown, because it's a real tough nut to crack when you don't have empty land to work with.
And if memory serves me right, a few years ago, council was approached by someone, and they were trying to, I think they were trying to get 5 or 6 housing units, and they fell short by 1 or 2 spaces, I think it was, and so that just kind of got abandoned. So it does seem that is an issue. Okay. Any further questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion giving direction to staff.
Move option 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Garten, second by Corriere. Discussion.
I would really like to add a constraint here on the number of apartments, bedrooms per apartment. I can move to amend, or Tim, do you have a preference on how to tackle that question?
Option 1, the staff report was just to waive it with no regard for unit size. Option 2 was to look at it probably for a 2-bedroom unit size.
Yeah, I'd like to see what the council's interest is. If option 1 fails, then I think option 2 becomes an next alternative. But if we're wanting to stimulate growth of housing downtown, I think option 1 is sort of our best lever for doing that. So that was my rationale.
Kelly, can you just clarify? I think under option 1, paragraph 2, it says staff is not in favor of a broad brush waiver of all spaces for 18 apartments that allow for configurations of up to 5 bedrooms per apartment. So can you kind of talk about that for a second? If option 1 is successful?
Well, if option 1 is successful, then a bedroom count wouldn't be part of the equation when we evaluate it.
Okay. Whereas option 2 would become constraining 2 bedrooms or less.
Correct. Or whatever number went into that. So just like it is now, it's 1 parking space per apartment, whether it's 1 bedroom or 5 bedrooms. So under option 1, it would just be no parking for the first 18 units developed on a property.
And it could be 5 bedrooms per apartment.
Yeah.
All right.
And the motion does not do anything about changing the distance for remote parking. We're still at the 300-foot remote parking requirement.
Yeah, I think you would have a follow-up motion if you want to address remote parking.
Well, actually, option 1 just waives all parking requirements, so it really doesn't make any difference. The distance, that'd be a second motion for anything over 18 units. Is that correct, Kelly?
That's how it would work. Yeah. Yeah. So under option 1, there's no parking required. So it doesn't matter where or if anybody had a parking space as a tenant or an owner of a housing unit downtown.
Okay. Everyone understand the motion? And this could be more than 2 bedrooms. It could keep on going, be larger. Okay.
Just a point of clarification for Kelly then. If someone comes in and builds I don't know what's the maximum stories, and has 50 units in that, or 60 or 70, are you saying the first 18 would still be excluded from parking? Or are you only looking for just want to make sure that. Kelly. For all development, new development, you're muted.
Not muted, I guess. That's open to discussion. You can do that either way. It could be targeted to small projects, or it could just be the first 18 units regardless.
Just want to make sure which way you want it. I want to clarify if the council clarify. Just for 18, no matter how many units are built, or only the small projects up to 18 units?
It's a good question, Steve. I hadn't thought about that. I guess I was looking at this just up to 18 units as the size of the project. Kelly, do you think there would be benefit in providing some constraints on that?
I don't know. it's a strange incentive if a third of your project has no parking. I'm not sure what that means to somebody or not, like what the value of that is. Meaning if you had a 54 unit project and the first 18 didn't need parking spaces, but you still had to build 36 parking spaces. That's probably really hard to guess on whether that's a big factor in the project or not. But those bigger projects are likely to have more land. So they probably have the ability to have some parking.
So which is the motion though?
The motion is option 1, and the way it was worded in the report was waive parking for up to 18 units.
Regardless of bedroom count.
Right.
And regardless of overall project size.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I think Steve makes an interesting point. I mean, the way this was presented to us as being a smaller project type of approach, that's why I didn't think about that. So the wording on this is really important. Kelly, if we wanted to provide some limitations that this is for the smaller projects, what would be your recommended wording?
It'd be pretty straightforward. We just write into the parking table, development of 18 apartments or less, 0 parking. Development of 19 or more apartments, 1 space per unit.
Okay.
It'd be a pretty straightforward distinction.
So I would ask to amend my motion to have a limit of 18 units total for the project.
Okay.
See, Gloria, who seconded the motion? Was that you, Amber? I'm sorry. Do you second the amendment or second the? Okay.
Yeah, second.
All right.
I'm a little bit concerned about the potential for 3, 4, 5 bedroom units in this area. So I don't think I'm going to be supporting the motion as is.
And I'll agree. I would rather see a bedroom count limit on the apartments. Otherwise, I think this is in the ballpark.
All right, you're going to send the motion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Okay, is Garten and Corey. Those opposed?
No.
All right, Morton, Junk, Betcher, and Bronwyn. Motion failed.
I'd move option 2,
Second.
Okay, move on.
which
Same
is,
question. Is it for up to 18 units?
yes, total, as, right.
Any project larger than 18 units, it would require whatever is required parking space, starting from the first unit. What you're saying, Brown? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, discussion. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? All right, option 2 carried unanimously. Kelly, is there any other direction you need from council with respect to how to execute that? Or is that something that you can go ahead and begin working on that and come back to council for further direction if necessary?
Yeah, we'll just start the text amendment process, which goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission and then back to council. It's a very short change to the zoning ordinance to address it.
Okay.
I think the other question in the staff report was if you wanted to direct the city manager to review our overnight parking restrictions in downtown as a parallel item.
Okay. David, did you have something you want to share?
I would like to make the motion that Kelly just said. I would move to direct the city manager to review options for changing overnight parking restrictions downtown.
I'll second.
All right, that was Martin and Junk. Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I'm also interested in having us reconsider the 300-foot distance requirement and would move that we change that to parking within the downtown service center zone for remote parking.
Second.
Moved by Betcher, second by Junk. Discussion?
So I have a couple of questions here. So first, I assume that you're only talking about satisfying the remote parking requirement for properties that are in the downtown service center, correct?
Correct.
And, okay, in addition, I guess I would like to see there be a buffer around the downtown service center as well. I get the sense of what you're saying, but I think it would be reasonable to look at like a block radius around the circumference of the downtown service center too. So I guess I would support your request, but I wonder whether we could be a little more generous in allowing people to find parking, for example, on the other side of the railroad tracks, although maybe that's the wrong zone. But that sort of thing, to go a little bit outside the circumference. Kelly, do you have a response to expanding the envelope in that fashion?
I don't have an issue going south. We do own an SGA zoned city parking lot south of the tracks, and then downtown Gateway Commercial. It's designed to allow for shared parking within that zone already. So maybe potentially working with that makes some sense. I'd have to look at that as we did the zoning text amendment to think about what the relationships are there.
Question for you, Kelly, is would it be, I mean, there's a motion that made and seconded. Would it be more beneficial to have staff look at this and come back with a little more information or suggestion on how to implement that versus just having that policy decision made at this point in time?
It's one that I'd have to think about the language. So if you want us to work through the process, I can do that. Or if you want us to develop an option and come back to you at a later date, I can do that also.
Yeah. Not trying to second guess your motion, Gloria. I just want to make sure we have the information that you're looking for.
No, that's fine. Kelly, which of those two options is preferable to you?
It doesn't sound like it's a rush. So I'm comfortable with either.
So do I want to amend my motion or withdraw my motion?
I can withdraw and then just start over again.
Okay, so I'll withdraw that motion. And I will move that we have staff come back to us with recommendations on expanding the radius for remote parking for the downtown service center.
Second.
All right. Thank you, Gloria and David. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Thanks, Kelly. Can move on to item 27, hearing regarding vacating public utility easement located across portion of Southtown subdivision, locally known as 300 and 310 South 17th Street. Does anyone have questions for staff on this particular item? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Brian, is there anybody who wants to address council on this particular item?
Here, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Okay, I declare the public hearing to be closed. I entertain a motion on resolution approving vacating public utility easement.
Move alternative one.
Second.
Garten, and I'm sorry, who, second? Amber, thank you. Roll call.
Wait, I'm sorry. Alternative one is setting the date of the public hearing. We actually need to vacate the easement tonight, right?
Right, it's just, yeah, it's just basically move approval of resolution. Thank you, David. At your motion, Tim?
I apologize. It is. I was just reading the alternative, but David is correct. We should be to move to vacate. So that is my motion.
Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Moriarty,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Beauty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 28, hearing regarding the establishment of a new industrial zoning district to be known as the Intensive Industrial Zone in Chapter 29, Article 9 of the Ames Municipal Code. Questions for Kelly, or Kelly, do you want to highlight anything in particular tonight?
I think you're obviously this industrial district is a little bit different than our other ones. As we described in the staff report, it's kind of a compilation of planned industrial and general industrial. It's intended to be used only east of I-35. The idea there is that these are large tracts of land. They have different economic development options compared to other industrial lands in the city. That's why it allows for these really intense, large manufacturing or distribution type of facilities. The zoning is really that step that we have to take to, as AEDC requested, to be able to really continue to market the property as we look at extending utilities here in 2021 to this area. There is no action to rezone any properties by doing this, but it does put the zoning district into the ordinance. So when a property is ready to develop, the zone is known, and we can move forward in a very quick manner to rezone the property as needed.
Questions for Kelly?
Kelly, at various points over the last few years, as we've been discussing this industrial area, the question of water super users has come up, and whether we are interested in trying to attract those industrial uses that put a strain on our water supply or could put a strain on our water supply in the future. And I'm just wondering if you could say anything about these permitted uses and whether they are water intensive uses or not.
So potentially they could be. And all of staff is aware of this issue, as you brought up, Gloria. I think the only place it's really included in city policy is through our economic development strategies, that we're not interested in incentives for large water users. And that's really the message that we have as a city. But from a zoning perspective, which is really our controls over the property, the way that we could address it as written in the current ordinance, and this is included in all of our industrial districts, at the end of the ordinance is a special assessment requirement that applies to industrial users, where you have to describe the use, and then if your estimates of water needs or sewer generation were an issue to the city system, then I have the ability to deny that site development plan. So the way it's worded is it's the very end of the ordinance is under site development plan requirements. You have to submit a use analysis report. And we have never done this since I've been here. No one's been denied because they couldn't meet our expectations. But it says that if the approving authority exercising independent judgment, there is a reason to believe that the proposed use or structure will create a nuisance in terms of diminished, and it lists off a lot of things, including sewage or water quality or street system capacity, then we have the ability to deny that request. So that's our total backstop on this area. If for some reason nobody needed a financial incentive and they were a very large water user and that we just couldn't support them, we do have the ability to deny that permit.
And what about the question of odors that the Planning and Zoning Commission were interested in?
That's a very difficult issue. Odor is a little bit of a subjective matter. Clearly, there are odors that everybody's going to understand is objectionable. That same usage report does want to identify some of those kinds of attributes, but there's not that same level of an absolute, like, you know, what's the degree of the odor or the strength of the odor, or how frequent is that odor emitted? It's a lot more subjective. And once the project's approved and started, we don't have any kind of odor management ordinance in the city. So I wouldn't be able to go back and say your operations are exceeding some standard. So it's, again, in the other industrial zones in the city, we have the same language. And what I think the Planning and Zoning Commission was most concerned about was if the east growth scenario did actually happen with housing, how compatible of a neighbor is this? And what I discussed with them was, if the East Industrial Development, which was priority one, that was a given in Plan 2040 that we're going to build industrial uses here, and it is not compatible, then we would have to revisit some of those assumptions for the East growth area and look at what really is compatible in those areas. So to me, in this area, you look for the industrial. If it does happen to be a user that is objectionable or not compatible, then we would go back and alter the land use assumptions for residential.
And my last question has to do with vehicle service facilities. I think at some point we had a request for a use on the Caramoli property that had to do with vehicle servicing. It seems like there might be a reason to be interested in making it possible to have industrial vehicle service facilities in an industrial area. So I'm just wondering about the exclusion of that particular use.
So the Article 5 of the zoning ordinance breaks out our uses and describes them in greater detail. If it was truly a truck repair kind of business, it actually falls under industrial service, which is a permitted use here. Vehicle service facilities is really meant to target passenger vehicles, gas stations, small repair shops. So if it truly was an industrial repair kind of use, then it falls into a different category than vehicle service facility. If you allowed vehicle service facilities here, what you would be adding to the list would be gas stations essentially, and then essentially passenger vehicle repair shops would also be an option. So there wouldn't be any gray area. It would just be pretty clear that all kinds of vehicle service facilities, truck or passenger, would be permissible.
Thank you.
Other questions for Kelly? Kelly, can you just comment just briefly on what the landscaping requirements might be out there? I understand that there's a 15%, I think it's open space or potentially green space, which could be which would, I believe, would include your stormwater retention would fall under that. But just where would what would be the landscaping requirements out there so it doesn't become onerous to potential?
The only unique attribute that we put out here was the ability for staff to require additional screening for certain types of outdoor appurtenances to a site that are probably unsightly or could benefit from additional landscaping. We're applying our normal front yard landscaping requirement and our normal parking lot landscape requirement. And then we copied over the total site coverage percentages that we use in the other districts, which means that you have to reserve at least 15% of your site as it's called landscaped area, but there's no planting pattern that's required of that. So it could be grass, it could be prairie, it could be trees, it could be anything to meet that percentage. And that would include all of your setbacks. It would include landscaping in your parking lot, and it could also include stormwater treatment features that are not ponds. So the 15% is the number that we use across the city. I think some of the questions or comments that come up is if you start to imagine large scale sites, is that the most efficient use of land? It may or may not be. It kind of depends on how stormwater is treated. Is it treated on site or in an off-site common area facility? We're comfortable that it's not undermining the ability to use property here and really site the projects. That's why we maintained that standard. But that's kind of the issue that was discussed in terms of the percentage of landscaping on the site.
Thank you.
Kelly, it's likely that we're going to see a significant increase in truck traffic in this area. And when I think about what options trucks have for refueling, there aren't a ton in this area. So is it possible if we get into this at some point, there's a proposal to allow for a fuel station to accommodate these trucks? Is that something that could be built back in later?
I think so, or you might look at a commercial designation in the future. I think what we thought of as staff is that there's so many unknowns about the broad range of industrial uses we desire here. The priority was to get the industrial zone in place and not let some kind of small commercial use just kind of pop up accidentally and then deter or make it a little trickier for someone to site what they want out here. And for us to come back later, let's say in 3 to 5 years after 1 or 2 projects have been approved and started, and then kind of understand the patterns and see what commercial uses are needed. The land out here is 1,200 acres. There's going to be a need for commercial services if this builds out. So it makes sense that we would come back later and look at what the best commercial opportunities are out here after we see some pattern of development.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. Well done. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing regarding the establishment of a new industrial zoning district to be known as Intensive Industrial Zone in Chapter 29, Article 9 of the Ames Municipal Code. Brian, is there anybody that wishes to address council on this topic this evening?
Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Thank you, Ryan. We'll close the public hearing. Any further questions for staff? Otherwise, I entertain a motion on first passage of the ordinance as included in the packet.
So moved.
Garten,
Second.
second by Junk. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Sorry. Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 29, low income housing tax credit housing project, also known as a Baker subdivision. I believe that Vanessa is going to open up with some comments, and then Kelly's available. Good evening, Vanessa.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What you have before you tonight is some exciting news. We're not 8 months closer to possibly having some low-income housing, rental housing for residents in our community. We've been working hard trying to stay on track to be able to get to a point where we'll be able to submit an application to the Iowa Finance Authority for some low-income housing tax credits. But before we can get to that, there is some agreements that you have in front of you to discuss tonight. One is the option agreement and one is the develop agreement. And we've been both working with Prairie Fire and staff to make sure that we have met the requirements of IFA. A lot of the things that's driven by these agreements are requirements of IFA on their application. So we've been diligently trying to make sure that we cover all the bases and making sure that will be meeting their needs when we submit the application. And Kelly's going to follow up with a couple of more things, but the option agreement is that during their proposal, Prairie Fire offered to pay $2,500 for lot number 27 to construct the potential multifamily housing. And IFA requirements say they have to have ownership of that land in order to submit an application. So that basically is what the option agreement is for. And it's basically only if they get awarded the tax credits. If not, then the land lot still belongs to the city of Ames. And then the developer agreement, as you can see in your council action form, covers a lot of the, again, areas of the agreement of construction schedules, warranties, covenants, performance, and so forth in the agreement. So these are the two main items that we need to proceed forward with an application with Prairie Fire. And we do have Kelly Aubrey from Prairie Fire on if needed. So from there, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Yeah, it's going to get confusing. The developer's name is Kelly, and I'm Kelly, obviously, also. So, all I want to really talk about is the next steps. If council approves this tonight, which we're strongly recommending you do, we're excited to move forward on this. The next steps that we identified are to update the concept plan. So, City Council gave some comments in October that they would like Prairie Fire to address, and staff had some comments too about the site planning that requires some of the buildings to be adjusted to easier meet fire code and some other development standards that we have. So the plan was to bring that back in February for council to see a final design so that Prairie Fire could then move forward with completing the application. The application is due March 10th to IFA for the LIHTC applications. And then after that's submitted, we won't hear back on whether we or Prairie Fire got the tax credits until August of next year. And if we do get them, then they'll move forward, completing the option agreement, purchasing the property, and then move into design and come back to city council for final approval of the actual plan. So a major site plan will come back to council ultimately to approve all of the site improvements and all of the building features, roughly a year from now if everything goes well.
Okay. Questions for Kelly Diekman or Vanessa?
I do have a question. I've heard some concern that the way the contract is written and its mention of up to 50 units might suggest a change in the overall density plan for the site from what council previously discussed. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that measure is not intended to mean that the developer is trying to get to 50 units. And in fact, when we've talked to Prairie Fire throughout the interview process, they really haven't been interested in trying to maximize more units on the property. In consultation with them about having to move certain buildings, staff suggested that if the same footprints could accommodate a couple of more units without changing the overall amount of green space and the scale and the relationships that you all endorsed in October, and I think we would work with that. We don't know if that's feasible or not yet. That's what that final concept would show you. But there's no way that we're trying to get to 50 units on this property.
Thanks.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Kelly, does staff or Prairie Fire need any further input from council regarding, we had some conversations regarding the density, just general, appearance, massing, what we're trying to accomplish. I think that was part of the reason that Prairie Fire was selected. Is there enough information at this point for them to move forward with some refinement of the concepts?
When we had a meeting with them and their architects a couple of weeks ago while we're working on the agreement, they had reviewed the meeting, heard some of your comments. We talked about it with them. And the intent is that in January, we're going to meet with the architect and look at some of the roof lines. Again, some of the apartment building needs to flip-flop its position and move further away from the single-family homes. So once we see how that works, look at some of the roof lines, and then the probably some window proportions are the main issues that we would be looking at. The building materials, they were pretty high quality to start with, and they need to stay that way because of the IFA application gives you points for that. So it was a combination of brick and cement board siding were the features there. So they're pretty the high quality materials. With that, they're gonna give us some examples back, and we were gonna try to refine that for council to review here in February or at the end of January if possible.
Okay. Seeing no further questions at this point, I'm going to declare the public hearing regarding the option agreement with Prairie Fire Corporation in conjunction with Lot 27 and Baker subdivision to be open. Ryan, is there anyone who wants to address council on this particular topic this evening?
Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, we will close public hearing. Council, any further questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion on resolution approving option agreement for the sale of the site to Prairie Fire Corporation.
So moved.
Betcher?
Second.
Martin? Thank you. Hearing no further questions or discussion, roll call, please.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Nay.
Junk,
Aye.
Poirieri,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Thank you. And entertain a motion on resolution approving developers agreement between the City of Ames, Prairie Fire Corporation, and Builders Development Corporation.
So
Move
moved.
approval. Oh,
Martin and Betcher.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Just, Mayor, if I could, just a brief comment. I don't want to relitigate the October meeting, but to explain for people who weren't watching that meeting, the reason why I'm not supporting this is that I think that this plan is inconsistent with our council's goals. We had a staff report that said that the the proposed option that allowed for 50 units met all the green space requirements. And we heard that from staff that we haven't had a project like this in 30 years. And so instead of going with a 50 unit that would accommodate an additional 14 families to live in our community, we punted on a very critical vote and went with the lower number of units. And I feel like this is one of the poor decisions we've made. We didn't receive any input as far as the number of people who have Section 8 housing vouchers and can't find housing. That wasn't relevant to us. And I would point out cities like Iowa City have things like Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where they're trying to find ways to address housing disparities. And this was a very good opportunity for our community to do exactly that here. And we chose green space over accommodating people who really needed this housing. So that's all I wanted to say. But I think I was also very concerned that we never heard from Ames or other advocacy groups. This was game time for our housing folks to care about low-income housing. And I think we really dropped the ball on this. Thanks.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Nay.
Junk,
Aye.
Poirieri,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 30, hearing on Homewood slope stabilization. Council, does anybody have questions for staff on this particular item?
Have we heard anything since yesterday from any of the Innis Grove neighborhood people?
Let's see, is Keith still here? No, I don't believe we have. I think we contacted the president of the association and sent out letters, but I don't think I've heard anything. I don't know if you had it either.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right, declare the public hearing on the Homewood Slope Stabilization Project to be open. Brian, is there anyone who wants to address council on this item this evening?
Mayor, I don't see anyone with their hand raised.
All right, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving final plans and specifications and awarding the contract to RW Excavating Solutions Incorporated of Prairie City, Iowa, in the amount of $535,192.55.
So moved.
Second.
Garten and Corriere, thank you. Roll call.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Poirieri,
Aye.
thank you. Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 31, hearing on amendment to the Plan Residence District Major Site Development Plan for a development known as Domine, located at 2200 Oakwood Road. Any questions for Kelly, or Kelly, any comments you want to make on this?
If there is, Benjamin Campbell's here to present it, but in essence, the project is the same in terms of character and layout. We had to make some detailed changes about setbacks to address building code issues, but the character of the project is the same as what you saw earlier this summer.
Any questions for Kelly or Benjamin? Hearing none, I declare the public hearing on the amendment to the Planned Residential District to be open. Brian, anyone that wants to address council on this?
I see a hand raised from Joyce Hammond.
Okay, all right. Welcome, Joyce. If you'd introduce yourself and your address, and then you may proceed with your comments.
Hi, I'm Joyce Hammond, 2932 White Oak Drive in Ames. And my comment would be, I have watched this and I've gotten letters on this, and I'm concerned about what has changed in the plan since the initial preliminary plan was approved, because I haven't seen a big change in anything when I have looked at the information provided to me and the information provided by the city, which I appreciate. It appears as if these lots need to be reduced, and as if this was an issue where the developer didn't recognize that he didn't have enough room. Yet, as a neighboring property, I was approached by the developer prior to the approval of the preliminary plans, and I was told that he was going to build 5 feet from my property, and by the developer, not the city. And when I told him that, you know, this was not part of our lot, is not part of the planned development, he said, well, I can build on your property line. And then he came back after he realized he couldn't, because I understand a little bit about zoning. And then I was told that he needed extra feet to build this. He wasn't going to move anything. And we were approached by him to sign a non-disclosure agreement if we would allow him to build into that 8-foot area and provide a letter to the city in support of the development, which we really had an issue with. And I walked away from him at that point because I told him, I said, you know, the city is going to determine the setback on this. But I thought the city should know how the developer approached neighbors, and it was not just me, it was our property and another property. And I think she would provide an affidavit. But we had to, we were trying to talk with him, and I think one of the neighbors had approached the city at a different hearing with concerns about why this was so close to our property and not. There was a green space, there was a pond, and then a green space along the whole edge of this property, along Oakwood Drive, White Oak Drive. And my concern is that a developer is approaching neighbors, asking them to provide a letter to the city and telling them they need more property because they can't make this development happen. Yet nothing that I can see was revised. And so now I'm feeling like they're coming back to the city saying, well, there was a miscalculation. I don't think there was a miscalculation, and I think it was kind of offensive as a property owner because a lot of comments were made. That this is now coming back to the city and addressed as a miscalculation where nothing was changed from the beginning. That's my concern.
Thank you, Joyce. Brian, is anybody else that wants to address council?
Mayor, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Ben,
I apologize. I'm sorry. I do see Keith Arneson with a hand raised.
Okay. Keith, could you introduce yourself and your address, please? And you may go ahead and make your comments.
Yes, Keith Arneson, 4114 Cochran Parkway. And, well, Mrs. Hammond and I don't agree on some things. I take exception to some of the things that were said. But I think rather than waste your time, I would like to know if you have any specific questions. the comment about the non-disclosure agreement was I offered them an easement to use the 8 foot of space up to the edge of the building, which they refused. So if there are other concerns though about this particular subdivision or my communications with the neighborhood as we went through this, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Keith. Council? I see none, Keith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian, is anybody else?
I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Benjamin and or Kelly, would you please address Ms. Hammond's question regarding what, if anything, has changed as precipitated the amendment to the major site development plan?
I can address that. The developer discovered as he was going forward and in further discussions with the city and with staff in both the planning division and the inspection division with our building official, that we needed to clarify some things about the setbacks. One of the main thing that came up that precipitated a number of the setbacks was eaves on the houses, and whether or not they would project over the property lines. The building official requested that eaves not project over property lines and be kept within a single lot. And so that accounts for a lot of the setbacks that you see there. So instead of the 0 lot line home directly abutting one property line, it's now going to be set back 1.5 feet from the 0 lot line property line. And that leaves 8.5 feet on the other side, but there's still the same spacing that is maintained in between the homes of 10 feet. And then regarding the exterior of the development, there is no change of the 8 feet, which the developer is obligated to abide by as part of the PRD regulations. So it will still be 8 feet from the home to the edge of the property.
So Benjamin, just a point of clarification to that, you're referring to lot 36 and lot 23, which are off of Suncrest Drive and immediately adjacent to the White Oak properties. What I'm hearing you say is that there was 8 feet between the face of the building and the property line, and that has not changed. Is that correct?
For the exterior of the development, yeah, so hang on, I'm just zooming in here. You're correct. Yeah, lot 36 and lot 23, there will still be 8 feet between the edge of those buildings and the property lines to the west.
So that has not changed whatsoever.
Correct.
To be clear, from the wall to the property line, eaves are allowed to project.
Correct.
If you want to misinterpret edge of a building.
Correct. Yes.
And that's the same across the city. Eaves project into setbacks all the time.
Okay. So the space between all the houses, all the units is going to be the same. It's just there's a minor shift of about 1.5 feet in order to make sure that the eaves fall within each individual piece of property. Is that correct?
Correct. There will be one exception. The lots 22 and 23 will have 9 feet. Lot 22 is going to be the model home, and the foundation has already been poured. So the applicant has agreed to and is required to fire rate the walls that are within 10 feet. So the walls of the building that are close to one another on the east side of the one lot and the west side of the other will be fire rated for 1 hour to account for the shorter setback.
But the adjacent property owner won't notice any difference because that's between brand new units, not between existing property line and the new building itself.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, council, any questions for Kelly or Benjamin? Thank you, Benjamin. If not, I entertain a motion on resolution approving amendment to the planned residence district major site development plan.
Move alternative one.
which is
Approve the major site development plan amendment for Dominique to modify setbacks and building separation requirements as described in this report and the following conditions, A and B.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Amber, thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Junk,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 32, hearing on major site development plan, alternative landscape plan for 1910 Isaac Newton Drive, Quick Trip Incorporated. Kelly, is there anything you want to comment on? Otherwise, council, do you have any questions for staff on this item?
Billy Gold's here if you have questions, and I know the applicant is here as well if you have questions for them.
Any questions for Kelly or the applicant? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing on the major site development plan, alternative landscape plan for 1910 Isaac Newton Drive, Quick Trip Incorporated to be open. Brian, is there anyone who wishes to address council on this item?
Yes, Mayor, I see Wade Dumond has a hand raised.
All right. Wade, if you introduce yourself, please, and your address, and if you are representing anybody.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is Wade Dumond with Quick Star out of La Crosse, Wisconsin. And I really just wanted to make myself available if you had any questions regarding the application. Thank you.
And by the way, thank you for coming to Ames and developing in this area. Any questions for Wade? I don't believe there is. Thank you for making yourself available.
Thank you.
Anybody else, Brian?
Mayor, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, I declare the public hearing to be closed. Any questions for staff? All right, entertain a motion on resolution approving the major site development plan, alternative landscaping plan.
So moved.
Betcher,
Second.
Junk, thank you. Roll call.
Corey,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to ordinances. Item 33. Regarding short-term rentals. As council may see on the agenda, staff is requesting both second and third passages. We'll go through the second one, and then we will see if council is interested in suspending the rules and also doing third passage this evening. So first of all, entertain a motion on second passage of ordinance amending chapter 29 zoning.
Move on second.
Corey,
Second.
Beatty Hansen, thank you. Roll call.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corey.
Aye.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules and have proceed with a third reading this evening.
Move to waive the rules.
Corey,
Second.
Junk, thank you. Roll call.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corey.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain motion on third passage of ordinance amending chapter 29 zoning.
Move on third.
Corey, round one, thank you. Roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corey.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain motion on second passage of ordinance amending chapter 13 rental.
Move on second.
Garten,
Second.
Bronwyn, thank you. Roll call.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain a motion suspending the rules and having considering third passage on this ordinance this evening.
So moved.
Bronwyn,
Second.
Rachel, thank you. Roll call.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain a motion on third passage of ordinance amending chapter 13 rental.
Move on third.
Bronwyn,
Second.
Rachel, thank you. Roll call.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain a motion on second passage of ordinance amending chapter 35 guest lodging.
Move on second. Second.
And Rachel, thank you. Roll call.
Martin.
Aye.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain a motion to suspend the rules and to take action on the third passage of this ordinance this evening.
So moved.
Bronwyn,
Second.
Rachel, thank you. Roll call.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain motion on third passage of ordinance amending chapter 35 guest lodging.
Move on second.
Move on third.
Move on third, sorry.
Thank you.
Second.
Who's on third?
And Rachel, thank you. Roll call.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 34, third passage, entertain a motion on third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4424.
Can we vote more on the previous one? I liked voting on the previous one.
What's that?
Never
We
mind.
can do it a fourth time.
We're getting punchy, I think, at the end of the year here. All right. Now you got me all flustered. All right. Entertain a motion on third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4424, amending the East University impacted urban revitalization area boundary by adding 313 Lynn Avenue and adding an expiration date of April 1st, 2024.
So moved.
Third.
Second.
I'm sorry, did I catch that Gloria or Bronwyn?
Gloria can have it.
Gloria. Rachel, thank you. Roll call, please.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain a motion on third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4425 regarding the extension of building features into required setbacks.
Move on third.
Rachel,
Second.
Gloria, thank you. Roll call.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 36, entertain a motion on third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4426, a face covering ordinance extending sunset clause to June 30th, 2021.
Move on third.
Rachel? And Corriere, second. Thank you. Roll call.
Junk.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Nay.
Okay. Moving on, disposition of communications to council. We have 4 items before you this evening. The first is letter from MediaCom, which is just for your information. Second is letter from Chuck Winkleblack, Hunsaker and Associates regarding a revised start date of spec building on South Bell. Steve, do you want to mention anything on this particular one?
I don't think any action is required. Mr. Winkleback's, I think, telling you that he, according to our agreement, he wasn't able to keep on schedule, but he has been hampered by the COVID, so he's moving ahead with it, with his project as required under our TIF project. So it's just for your notification.
Yeah, thank you. Item 3, memo from Brian Phillips regarding the update on the small arts grant program. Any questions for staff on this memo?
Mayor, I'd like to move that we put this item on the agenda in January to discuss the direction that PAC is taking.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved by Bescher, second by Martin. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And number 4 is a letter that was actually pertinent to the vending on public streets and sidewalks in Campus Town. So
yeah, Gloria's motion already took care of that.
Okay. All right, we'll start with council comments. Bronwyn, we'll start with you tonight.
Nothing for me tonight, thanks.
All right, Gloria.
I want to wish everybody happy holidays and let's hope for a better 2021. And thank you to the City of Ames staff for all of the hard work that they've put in throughout this COVID crisis. And I hope that 2021 will get easier for you to deal with. That's all.
Nicole.
Just happy holidays and then happy birthday to Rachel.
Rachel.
I'm tempted to break out in a song, but you don't want to hear me sing. So we're just gonna, Rachel will spare you the embarrassment. How's that sound?
Thank you.
All right, birthday girl, we'll let you go next.
No comments tonight, thank you.
All right, Amber.
Nothing for me.
David.
No comments, thank you.
Tim.
Can't let this go by. Iowa State had a great game. Didn't turn out the way we'd hoped. The best in the game, the Fiesta Bowl, against number 25 Oregon. Nothing else.
All right. I'll just close, really echoing what Gloria said, and I think that council is unanimous in the support of the city staff. All that you have done this entire year, it's been an incredible year. I don't think anyone could ever envision what you've done. Steve, thanks for your leadership and for working with your department heads, and I would agree. I hope that 2021 will see somewhat of a demise of that, and so we are. I think the community is expresses gratitude for your efforts.
We've got a great team, great staff, and we appreciate the council support too, especially during the difficult times. The support is very welcome. A lot of pressure on staff, and they're doing a great job.
Yeah, they are. I also had the privilege, and I would call it an honor, to participate in the first Reads Across America. Is actually something that we're the American Legion Writers is actually connected with this group, and across the entire United States, over 2,500 different ceremonies were held at the same time, including Arlington National Cemetery, and over 1.8 million wreaths were placed at the graves of veterans. And this is a difficult time for all, I'm sure, veterans' families who have lost veterans, but it was a solemn, but also I think a very worthy ceremony. And this is something they're going to continue on doing. This year was one at the 6 different branches of the military, and then also POW, MIA, held out at the cemetery. And I think their goal next year is to place a wreath at every veteran's grave in all the cemeteries in Ames. And so I just think that it was a worthwhile, and it was an honor being part of that. So, and I would echo what Alderman said, is that wish everybody in the city of Ames staff very happy holiday, and looking forward to kicking off 2021 in a few weeks. So with that, entertain a motion to adjourn for the last time. Oh, Steve, did you have something you want to say?
Aye.
Oh, You were waving like you want to say something. Wow. Entertain a
Move
motion.
to adjourn.
All right, Amber. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Happy holidays.